He laughed, loudly enough for the lobby to hear, and called me a charity case with a kid. My ex-husband thought he held all the cards. He didn't notice my billionaire boss standing right behind him, eyes dark, ready to tear his miserable little world apart. The alarm went off at 4:45 a.m. It didn't buzz, it chimed. A soft acoustic guitar riff I had chosen 3 years ago, thinking it would ease me into the mornings. Now, it just sounded like a threat. I slapped the phone screen, plunging the bedroom back into darkness. The air was cold. It was always cold in November, especially in an apartment where the radiator clanked more than it heated. I lay there for exactly 30 seconds, counting the breaths of my 5-year-old Sam, who was curled into a small, warm ball in the bed next to mine. His chest rose and fell in a steady, comforting rhythm. This was the quietest part of the day, the only part that belonged to me. By 5:30 a.m., the machine was in motion. Coffee brewing, cheap beans, strong enough to strip paint, oatmeal in the microwave, ironing a white silk blouse while simultaneously packing a lunchbox with a precisely cut turkey sandwich and carrot sticks. Sam was a picky eater this month. Carrots had to be sticks, not rounds. Rounds meant a meltdown, and meltdowns meant we missed the 7:12 train. Missing the 7:12 train meant I was late to the towering glass monolith of Reed Global, and nobody was late for Harrison Reed. I wrestled Sam into his jacket, traded a quick, exhausted smile with Mrs. Gable, the retired nurse who lived downstairs and watched him until preschool started, and broke into a half-sprint toward the subway. The city was a damp, gray smear. Wind whipped through the concrete canyons, biting at my exposed ankles. I checked my phone. 14 unread emails, 3 from the legal department, 2 from logistics, 9 from Harrison's executive inbox, which I managed. I was 32 years old. I was a senior project manager. And I was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. It was a bone-deep exhaustion, the kind that settled in your marrow when you spent every waking second keeping the sky from falling on your kid's head. I swiped my badge at the security turnstile at 7:55 a.m. The lobby of Reed Global was an intimidating expanse of white marble and brushed steel. It smelled like expensive floor wax and raw ambition. I stepped into the elevator, mentally organizing the morning schedule, a merger acquisition at 10, a conference call with the Tokyo branch at noon. The elevator doors were sliding shut when a hand shot out, catching the rubber bumper. The doors retreated. "Hold it!" The voice hit me before the cologne did. It was a voice I had spent the last 3 years trying to scrape out of my brain. Sandpaper and false confidence. Trent stepped into the elevator. He was adjusting his tie, a smirk already resting comfortably on his face. He looked exactly the same. The same tailored navy suit that fit a little too snugly around the shoulders. The same perfectly styled hair. The same complete absence of an apology in his eyes. He looked up, freezing, when he saw me. For a second, the smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of genuine surprise. Then, the armor slid back into place. "Well," Trent said, leaning against the polished metal wall, "if it isn't Jenna, I didn't realize they let the secretarial pool use the executive elevators." I stared at the glowing numbers above the door. Breathe. Just breathe. "I'm a project manager, Trent. Have been for 2 years. What are you doing here?" "My firm is consulting on the Vanguard merger." He checked his reflection in the elevator door, adjusting his cuffs. "I'm leading the pitch. You know how it is. Upward mobility." He turned his head, looking me up and down. His gaze lingered on the slight scuff on the toe of my black pump. then drifted up to the faint dark circles under my eyes that concealer couldn't entirely hide. "You look tired, Jen," he said. The faux sympathy was a familiar weapon. "Motherhood running you ragged? I told you, kids are a career killer. But you always were stubborn." My jaw tightened. "Sam is fine. I'm fine. We're doing perfectly well. Are you?" He let out a short nasal laugh. "Because from where I'm standing, you look like you're barely treading water. You know my new fiancée, she manages to run a startup and still make time for Pilates. But then again, she doesn't have an anchor dragging her down. The air in the small cabin suddenly felt too thin to breathe. It wasn't the insult to me that stung. It was the casual dismissal of his own son. An anchor. That's all Sam was to him. A financial obligation he bitterly paid the minimum on. A weekend every other month he conveniently forgot. "Don't talk about him like that," I said, my voice dropping to a low, hard register. "Oh, relax." Trent waved a hand dismissively. "I'm just being realistic. The corporate world doesn't care about your custody schedule, Jenna. You're swimming with sharks now. A single mom fetching coffee in a place like this? It's almost sad. You're out of your depth." The elevator chimed. Floor 42, executive level. The doors slid open. I stepped out without looking back, my hand shaking slightly, fingernails biting into the leather handle of my bag. "Hey, Jen," Trent called out as the doors began to close behind him. "If you ever need a reference for a receptionist gig, let me know. I'll put in a good word." The doors shut. I stood in the silent, carpeted hallway, swallowing down a sudden furious lump in my throat. I didn't have time to be angry. I didn't have time to cry. I had a merger to manage. I squared my shoulders, smoothed down my skirt, and walked toward the heavy oak doors of the CEO's office. Harrison Reed did not shout. He never had to. When things went wrong, his voice simply got quieter, dropping to a low, even timbre that made grown men in $1,000 suits sweat through their shirts. He was 38, built like a man who spent his frustrations on a heavy bag rather than a golf course, and possessed a mind that stripped away nonsense with surgical precision. I walked into his outer office at 8:02 a.m. "The Vanguard files are on your desk," I said, setting my bag down and immediately booting up my terminal. "Legal flag clause 4, section B. I highlighted the discrepancy. Also, your 10 o'clock was pushed to 10:15. Traffic." Harrison was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the grid of the city. He didn't turn around. He was drinking a glass of water, not coffee. He never drank coffee. "Did legal provide an alternative clause?" he asked. "Yes, it's tabbed in red." He finally turned. His eyes were a sharp, unreadable gray. He looked tired, too, but it was a different kind of tired. The exhaustion of a man carrying the weight of a 10,000-employee empire on his shoulders. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to the forearms, revealing a worn, leather-banded watch that looked entirely out of place on a billionaire. "Good," Harrison said. He walked over to his desk, flipping open the file. He read the red tab page in under 10 seconds. "This is acceptable. Get Vanguard's team on the line at 9. They wanted an in-person meeting. They're sending their consulting firm." Harrison paused, looking up. "The consulting firm?" "Sterling and Associates," I said, keeping my voice perfectly neutral. "A Mr. Trent Miller is leading their pitch." Harrison's gaze sharpened. He had an uncanny ability to read a room, to catch the slight micro-expressions people tried to hide. He watched me for a moment, his eyes dropping briefly to the tight grip I had on my tablet. "Is that going to be a problem, Jenna?" "No, sir, not at all." He held my gaze for a second longer than necessary, then nodded. "Fine. Prepare the boardroom. The day descended into a blur of spreadsheets, phone calls, and putting out fires. I ate half my sandwich at my desk while cross-referencing shipping manifests. At 3 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Gable. Sam has a slight fever. 100.2. He's fussy, but okay. Just letting you know, my heart did that familiar painful squeeze. The single mother's dilemma. Panic or compartmentalize. I calculated the time. I couldn't leave. The Vanguard meeting was at 4. If I left now, I'd stall a $60 million acquisition. If I stayed, my son was sick and crying for me. I typed back frantically, "Give him Tylenol. I'll be there the second I can. Please keep me updated." I put the phone face down on the desk and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes. Just breathe. He's with Mrs. Gable. He's safe. Do the work. Jenna. I jumped, dropping my hands. Harrison was standing in the doorway of his office. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the quarterly reports in his hand. But he had seen. I knew he had seen. "Yes, Mr. Reed?" "The Vanguard team is in the lobby," he said, finally looking up. "Bring them up. And Jenna?" "Yes?" I can take a breath. "You look like you're about to run through a wall." It wasn't an insult. It was an observation. Grounded. Matter of fact. "Just a long day," I managed to say. "It's about to get longer," he replied, turning back into his office. 10 minutes later, I opened the heavy glass doors to the main boardroom. Trent walked in, flanked by 2 junior analysts. He stopped when he saw me standing by the projector, organizing the handouts. "Well," Trent said softly, stepping close enough that I could smell his mints. "Look who's playing hostess. Try not to spill the water, Jen." I ignored him, distributing the folders with mechanical precision. Harrison entered the room a moment later. The atmosphere instantly shifted. The air grew dense, heavy with the gravity he brought into every space he occupied. Trent immediately straightened, pasting on a bright, eager smile. "Mr. Reed," Trent said, extending a hand. "Trent Miller. An honor, sir." Harrison looked at the hand for a fraction of a second before taking it. A brief, firm shake. "Miller, let's see what you have. I don't have all afternoon." The meeting was brutal. Harrison didn't tolerate fluff. Every time Trent tried to use corporate buzzwords, Harrison cut him off, demanding raw data. I sat in the corner taking minutes, my phone buzzing quietly in my pocket. Every buzz was a spike of anxiety. Was it Mrs. Gable? Was the fever spiking? About an hour in, Trent was visibly sweating. He was losing control of the pitch. He fumbled a metric regarding supply chain logistics. "That number's incorrect," Harrison said softly, leaning back in his leather chair. "I assure you, sir, our analyst pulled these figures this morning." "Jenna," Harrison said, not taking his eyes off Trent. "What was the Q3 overhead for the Southern District?" I didn't even have to look at my notes. 14.2 million, sir. An increase of 6% from Q2, primarily due to fuel surcharges, not labor costs, as Mr. Miller's suggesting. Trent whipped his head around to glare at me, his face flushing dark red. "With all due respect, Mr. Reed, I don't think your assistant has the full scope of the macroeconomic—" "She's not my assistant," Harrison interrupted, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet timbre. "She's my senior project manager, and she knows my company better than you know your own pitch deck. Continue, Mr. Miller, if you can." The rest of the meeting was a massacre. Trent stumbled through the remaining slides, his confidence shattered. When it was finally over, Harrison stood up. "We'll review your proposal. Don't call us. Jenna, a word in my office." I gathered my tablet and followed Harrison into his office, shutting the door behind me. I expected a debrief on the disaster we had just witnessed. Instead, Harrison walked to his desk, picked up his personal cell phone, and tossed it to me. I caught it on instinct. "Sir?" "Your phone has buzzed 6 times in the last hour," Harrison said, loosening his tie. "You check it every time you think I'm not looking and your breathing hitches. Who is it?" I froze. "It's nothing, Mr. Reed. Just personal." "I don't care about personal," he said, leaning against the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. "I care that my best project manager looks like she's carrying a piano on her back." "What's the problem?" The words "my best project manager" hit me so hard I almost lost my breath. I looked at the floor, fighting the sudden, humiliating sting of tears. "It's my son. Sam. He has a fever. He's at the sitters, but you need to be there. I have the Q4 reports to finish, and the Vanguard follow-up. The Q4 reports can wait until Monday. Vanguard is a mess that I'll handle." Harrison pushed off the desk and walked toward the coat rack. He grabbed my trench coat and held it out to me. "Go home to your kid, Jenna." I stared at him, bewildered. "Are you sure? I can work from home tonight once he's asleep." "Jenna." He said my name softly, cutting through my panic. "Stop negotiating. Go be a mother. The sky will not fall if you take a night off." I took the coat from him. Our fingers brushed. His hand was warm, calloused, real. "Thank you," I whispered. He just nodded, turning back to his window. "Tell Sam I hope he feels better." Friday evening. The annual Reed Global Charity Gala. It was a mandatory event for senior staff. Held in the grand ballroom of a downtown hotel, it was a sea of black tuxedos, sequin gowns, and forced networking. I was exhausted. Sam's fever had broken 2 days ago, but the sleepless nights had caught up with me. I wore a simple dark green sheath dress I had bought on clearance 3 years ago. It fit, it was clean, and it blended into the shadows. That was all I needed it to do. I stood near one of the massive ice sculptures, a glass of sparkling water in hand, running through the mental checklist of the weekend. Groceries, laundry, fix the leaky faucet in the bathroom. Well, Cinderella made it to the ball. I closed my eyes for a brief, painful second before turning around. Trent. He was holding a tumbler of scotch, swaying very slightly. He had clearly been taking advantage of the open bar. His firm hadn't gotten the Vanguard contract, news that had gone public that morning, and the bitterness was radiating off him in waves. "Trent," I said, keeping my tone flat, "this is a private corporate event." "My boss scored an invite," he sneered, taking a heavy swallow of his drink. He stepped into my personal space, forcing me to back up until my shoulders hit the cold stone of a pillar. "I guess I have you to thank for the humiliation on Tuesday, huh? Sabotaging my pitch to make yourself look good to the billionaire? You didn't know your numbers, Trent. I just corrected them. You always were a know-it-all." He scoffed, looking me up and down with undisguised contempt. "Look at you, wearing a dress from 4 seasons ago. You look exhausted, Jenna. You look old." I gripped my glass tighter, knuckles turning white. "Leave me alone. Or what?" He leaned in, his voice dropping to a nasty, cruel whisper. "You're going to cry? You're pathetic. You drag that kid around like a millstone, playing the martyr. Who's going to want you, Jen? A burned-out, bitter single mom. You're a liability. You'll be fetching coffee for the rest of your life, pretending it's a career." The words were precise. They were the exact insecurities that kept me awake at 3 a.m. The fear that I was failing Sam, failing myself, that I was entirely unlovable. My throat locked up. I tried to push past him, but he shifted, blocking my path. A cruel, victorious smile spreading across his face. "Admit it," he whispered. "You're nothing without—" Is there a problem here? The voice cut through the noise of the ballroom like a steel blade through silk. Trent jumped, spilling a few drops of scotch onto his shoe. He spun around. Harrison Reed was standing 3 feet away. He wasn't wearing a standard tuxedo. He wore a dark, tailored charcoal suit that looked like armor. His jaw was set tight, and his eyes, those sharp, unreadable gray eyes, were locked onto Trent with a cold, terrifying intensity. "Mr. Reed," Trent stammered, the arrogance instantly evaporating, replaced by raw panic. "No, sir, no problem. Jen and we're old friends. Just catching up." Harrison didn't look at Trent. He looked at me. He saw the way my shoulders were pulled up to my ears. He saw the pale, tight set of my mouth. He took a step forward, closing the distance. He didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. But the sheer, imposing presence of him forced Trent to stumble backward to give him room. Harrison stepped to my side. He lifted his right hand and placed it firmly on the small of my back. The heat of his palm bled through the thin fabric of my dress. It wasn't a tentative touch. It was possessive, protective, a heavy grounding anchor in the middle of a storm. He gently but firmly pulled me flush against his side. I gasped softly at the sudden contact, but I didn't pull away. My body instantly relaxed into the solid wall of his chest. Trent stared at the hand on my back, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. "Old friends?" Harrison repeated, the words sounding like gravel. He finally turned his gaze to Trent. The look was devastating. It was the look a man gives a cockroach before bringing his heel down. Odd, because from where I was standing, it looked like you were harassing my senior project manager. "No, sir, I was just—" "Shut up." Harrison's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the force of a sonic boom. Trent clamped his mouth shut, his face draining of color. "Let me make something perfectly clear to you, Mr. Miller," Harrison said slowly, pronouncing every syllable with lethal precision. "Jenna is the backbone of my logistics department. She possesses more intellect, drive, and integrity in her little finger than you could accumulate in 3 lifetimes." Trent swallowed hard, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. I meant no disrespect. You are a mediocre man," Harrison continued, his voice devoid of emotion, stating it like a mathematical fact. "You run from responsibility, you fail at your job, and you try to inflate your pathetic ego by belittling a woman who is infinitely out of your league. You are a failure, Trent. Professional and personal." Trent looked like he had been physically struck. The cruel, smug armor was gone, leaving only a hollow, terrified shell. He looked from Harrison to me, realizing in real time the magnitude of his mistake. "Now," Harrison said, his grip tightening slightly on my waist, pulling me even closer. "If you ever speak to her again, if you ever look in her direction, if you even breathe the same air as she does, I will personally ensure that the only job you can secure in this city is scraping the gum off the sidewalks outside my building. Do you understand me?" "Yes," Trent whispered, his voice cracking. "Yes, Mr. Reed." "Get out." Trent didn't hesitate. He turned and practically sprinted toward the exit, abandoning his drink on a passing waiter's tray. The silence between us was heavy. The music from the ballroom seemed to fade into the background. I was trembling slightly, the adrenaline crash hitting me hard. Harrison slowly turned to face me. He didn't drop his hand from my back. Instead, he shifted his stance, shielding me entirely from the view of the party. The cold, ruthless CEO vanished. The man looking down at me just looked concerned. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. I looked up into his gray eyes. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world alone. "Yes," I breathed, my voice shaky. "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "He was wrong, you know," Harrison said, his voice dropping to a low murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. He reached up with his free hand, gently brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. The touch was impossibly soft for a man so hard. "Wrong about what?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Harrison looked at my lips, then back up to my eyes. "He said nobody would want you. He's a complete fool." The spell broke the moment my phone vibrated in my clutch. It was a harsh mechanical buzz that sliced through the heavy heated air between us. I stepped back. The cold rushed in to fill the space Harrison had just occupied. I looked down, smoothing the front of my dress with trembling hands. I was a senior project manager. He signed my paychecks. He possessed the power to dismantle my life with a single signature. "I have to go," I said. My voice was entirely too thin. Harrison let his hand fall to his side. He didn't try to pull me back. He read the panic in my posture perfectly. "Jenna, thank you for handling Trent." I took another step back, retreating into the shadows of the ice sculpture. "But I need to get home to Sam. Mrs. Gable is charging time and a half past midnight." I didn't wait for his response. I turned and walked quickly toward the coat check, my heels clicking a frantic rhythm on the marble floor. The weekend was a blur of domestic survival. Groceries, laundry, wiping down counters. I scrubbed the bathroom grout until my knuckles bled, trying to erase the ghost of Harrison's hand on the small of my back. It was a lapse in judgment, a billionaire with a savior complex and a tired employee. It was a cliché I refused to become a part of. By Monday morning, I had built the fortress back up. I walked into the executive suite at 7:45 a.m., holding a stack of the finalized Vanguard files. My armor was a sharply pressed gray suit and a completely blank expression. Harrison arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. He walked past my desk. He paused, just for a fraction of a second. "Good morning, Jenna." "Good morning, Mr. Reed. The Vanguard acquisition goes to the board at 2. Your schedule is clear until 10. He looked at me. Really looked at me. His gray eyes cataloged the stiff set of my shoulders and the deliberate avoidance of eye contact. He gave a single curt nod and walked into his office. We played this game for 2 weeks. The boundaries were reestablished, thick and impenetrable. I was ruthlessly efficient. He was demanding and precise. We were a machine operating at peak capacity. But the silence between us hummed with a tension that was giving me a permanent migraine. On a rainy Thursday at 6:30 p.m., the office was empty. I was packing my bag, mentally calculating whether I had enough energy to boil pasta or if it was a cereal for dinner kind of night for Sam. Harrison's door clicked open. He leaned against the door frame, a file folder dangling from his hand. He looked exhausted. The sharp lines of his face were drawn tight. "The Q4 projections are solid," he said, tossing the file onto my desk. "Good work." "Thank you, sir. Good night." I slung my bag over my shoulder. "Stop calling me sir when the floor is empty, Jenna." I froze. I didn't look at him. "It's professional, Mr. Reed." "It's a wall," he corrected, his voice dropping to that quiet, dangerous pitch. He pushed off the door frame and walked toward my desk. "And I'm getting tired of climbing it." I finally looked up. He was standing entirely too close. "I have to protect my job. I have a son. I don't have the luxury of taking risks." Harrison placed his hands flat on my desk, leaning down till he was at my eye level. "You think you're a risk to me? Let's clarify the situation." He held up 3 fingers, ticking them down as he spoke. "Fact 1. You are the most competent person in this building. I need you here. Fact 2. I overstepped at the gala and I made you uncomfortable. For that, I apologize. Fact 3. I am not Trent. I do not view you as baggage. I view you as the most terrifyingly impressive woman I have ever met. I swallowed hard. The cynical part of my brain was screaming to run. What do you want, Harrison? Dinner. He didn't flinch. Not a corporate dinner, not a networking event, a date. Friday night. You pick the place. Somewhere you feel comfortable. I stared at him. The billionaire CEO, wearing a watch that cost more than my annual rent, asking me to pick a restaurant. I can't just leave Sam, I said, a final desperate defense. Mrs. Gable goes to bingo on Fridays. Then we go on Saturday afternoon, or Sunday morning, or we get takeout and eat it on a park bench while your kid plays on the swings. He straightened up. I manage a global supply chain, Jenna. I can handle a scheduling conflict. Tell me when. He wasn't sweeping me off my feet. He was standing on the ground, waiting for me to meet him there. Saturday, I heard myself say. 1 o'clock. There's a diner on 4th. The coffee is terrible, but they have decent pie. A slow, genuine smile broke across Harrison's face. It completely changed him. The ruthless executive vanished, leaving behind a man who just looked incredibly relieved. Saturday at 1. I'll be there. The diner on 4th smelled of burnt grease, old bleach, and cheap vanilla air freshener. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, pine-scented air of the executive floor. I arrived 10 minutes early, intensely regretting my decision. I wore jeans and a black sweater. Normal clothes. I felt horribly exposed. At exactly 1 o'clock, the bell above the door chimed. Harrison walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore dark denim, boots, and a heavy wool sweater. He looked around the cramped diner, spotted me in the corner booth, and walked over. He slid into the vinyl booth across from me. It squeaked loudly in protest. He picked up the laminated sticky menu. What's good? The cherry pie, I said, my voice tight. Everything else is a gamble. We ordered pie and terrible coffee, and then we talked. He didn't talk about mergers. He didn't talk about his wealth. He asked about Sam. He asked about what I wanted to do before the world forced me to become a project manager. I told him about the architecture degree I never finished. He told me about his father, a mechanic who built a logistics company out of a single garage, and the pressure of inheriting an empire he never actually wanted. He listened. He didn't interrupt to solve my problems. He just sat there, drinking horrible coffee, and treated me like a human being. 2 months later, he met Sam. It wasn't a grand, orchestrated event. It was a Tuesday evening. My radiator had finally given up, flooding the living room floor. I was frantic, soaked in dirty water, trying to salvage a rug, when Harrison showed up to drop off a file I'd left at the office. He didn't call his super or hire a team. He took off his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and helped me mop. Sam emerged from his bedroom clutching a battered stuffed dinosaur. He stared at the giant man in his living room. Harrison stopped mopping. He knelt down, right in the middle of the puddle, ruining his expensive slacks. He didn't use a baby voice. He spoke to Sam exactly how he spoke to his board of directors, with quiet, absolute respect. "Hello, Sam. I'm Harrison. I work with your mom." Sam eyed him suspiciously. "Are you fixing the water?" "Trying to," Harrison said. "But I think your mom is better at it than I am." Sam stepped closer, inspecting Harrison's soaked knees. "My dad doesn't like getting dirty." The room went dead silent. My heart stopped in my chest. Harrison didn't miss a beat. "Sometimes getting dirty is the only way to fix things." He pointed to the dinosaur. Is that a T-Rex or an Allosaurus? The arm length is throwing me off. Sam's eyes lit up. It's an Allosaurus. T-Rex has 2 fingers. He has 3. Good catch, Harrison nodded solemnly. I stand corrected. I leaned against the kitchen counter, holding a wet towel, and watched them. Trent had never once asked Sam about his dinosaurs. The integration of Harrison Reed into our lives was not a fairy tale. It was a series of deliberate, grounded choices. It was him showing up with takeout when I was working late. It was him sitting on the floor, helping Sam build impossibly complex Lego structures, while I finally, desperately, took a nap. 6 months in, Trent made his final move. He filed a petition for primary custody. It was a blatant extortion attempt designed to force me to pay him off to drop it, knowing I was now connected to Harrison. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the legal notice, the old familiar panic gripping my throat. The sky was falling again. Harrison walked in from the living room where Sam was watching cartoons. He saw my face, saw the paper, and pulled out a chair sitting next to me. He read it in silence, his jaw locked. The cold, ruthless CEO flared in his eyes. I will crush him, Harrison said, his voice a low, lethal hum. I will bury him in litigation until he can't afford to buy breath mints. No, I said. Harrison looked at me surprised. I don't need you to fight my battles, Harrison, I said, putting my hand flat over the paper. Trent wants me to panic. He wants me to feel small. I am not small anymore, and I will not let you buy my way out of this. Harrison stared at me for a long time. The anger in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by something much deeper. A profound, unwavering respect. Okay, he said quietly. How do we handle it? We, not I, not you. I hire a lawyer, I said, my voice steadying. I gather the visitation logs proving he's seen Sam 3 times in a year. I gather the financial records proving his missed child support. I go to court, and I win on the facts. I know a very good family lawyer, Harrison offered. I won't pay for her, but I will make the introduction. I nodded. I'd appreciate that. I went to court. Harrison sat in the gallery, 2 rows back. He didn't wear an intimidating suit. He wore a simple button-down. He sat quietly, a physical anchor in a chaotic room. Trent represented himself, trying to charm the judge. He was dismantled in under 20 minutes. The judge dismissed his petition with prejudice and garnished his wages for the back child support. As we walked out of the courthouse, the crisp spring air hit my face. I felt lighter than I had in 5 years. Trent was waiting on the steps. He looked haggard, his suit rumpled. He glared at us as we approached. You think you've won? Trent spat, looking at Harrison. You're just buying used goods, Reed. She'll drag you down. I didn't let Harrison step in front of me. I stepped forward. Trent, I said quietly, looking my ex-husband dead in the eyes. You called me an anchor. You were right. An anchor holds things steady when the storm hits. You are just a paper boat. Don't ever contact me again. I turned away. Harrison offered me his arm. I didn't take it. Instead, I reached down and slipped my hand perfectly into his. His fingers curled around mine, warm and solid. We walked down the steps toward the street. So, Harrison said, looking straight ahead, the ghost of a smile on his lips. A paper boat. It felt right in the moment. It was highly accurate. He squeezed my hand. Sam has a school play on Friday. Are we still building the cardboard tree? We are, I said. And you promised you'd paint the leaves. I did. He looked down at me, his gray eyes soft and completely unguarded. I'm not going anywhere, Jenna. Not for the storms. Not for the painting. I leaned my head against his shoulder as we walked, the noise of the city fading around us. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight alone. I was just walking. If you've ever been made to feel like you're too much baggage or not enough woman, this story is for you. Drop a like if you believe single moms deserve the world, and share this with someone who needs a reminder of their worth. Don't forget to subscribe for more grounded, real stories of people finding their strength and their person. Hit that bell icon, and I'll see you in the next video.